Known to be India's first social startup, Periferry has been successful at helping out transgenders throughout its journey. In the past 3 years, the organization has brought in a huge difference in their lives by providing job opportunities and training. It also aims at encouraging LGBTQ inclusive workspaces. Today, we have with us Ms. Neelam Jain, the founder of Periphery, to talk on the organization's work and much more. Welcome, ma'am.
So hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me on your talk show. So basically, my name is Neelam Jain, and I'm the founder of Periferry. So Periferry is a social startup, and we're focused on creating employment and business opportunities for the transgender community. It's been over 3 years since I kick-started this initiative, and while we started off as an organization that focused on job creation, now what we also do is creating awareness for the LGBTQ community in workspaces and creating a culture and environment where people accept different genders and sexuality. That's overall our work. Quite honestly, I think one of the most challenging thing in anything that you any new thing that you start is you kind of have some guidebook or something you reflect on and say, okay, this is how they did it, so this is how I should do it. But for periphery, we didn't have any path like that. Like there was no head or tail of figuring out, okay, who has done this in the past, how have they done it. There was no rule book, there was no guidebook, nothing. So it was a completely uncharted territory, I would say. So I think the biggest challenge was even to figure out how to go about doing this. So it involved a lot of field work. It involved a lot of dealing and working directly with the transgender community and also with the corporate world. So we were literally working with two ends of the society, the trans community on one side and the corporate world on the other side. And one big challenge was both the sides didn't fully trust us when we began. The corporate world thought that we were too young. What are these kids trying to do? God only knows. The transgender community has been exploited so much that for them to trust anybody new saying that, okay, when we reach out to them and say, "La nang kandipa job tarona," there it's very difficult for them to actually believe that. So it took a lot of time, and that was the biggest challenge because somewhere we had our finances covered. I had my savings. I had support from my family, who always sort of guided me on how to develop like a even a business model around it. But to gain the trust from both the ends and to actually make it a successful sustainable venture was one of the biggest challenges. Okay, if I've got your question right, then that's true. I think every organization, every venture continues to face challenges even when they're growing. It's just that the challenge changes with every phase. When you're just starting, your challenge may be very different to maybe gain the trust, have the money, develop a sustainable model and all of that. After you've grown up, the challenge is on sustaining it is to ensure that you're regularly doing that work, and now you're actually scaling up your work as well. So now our biggest challenge is to actually scale up our organization because placing 5 people, 10 people in jobs per month is great, but we envision to actually place like 50, 100 people at least every month or 2 months, and doing that in the current pandemic has been quite challenging. Constantly having the community go through training, etc. So, I mean, I don't want to go and I just say that there are so many challenges because this that's also the reason why we enjoy it so much. Yeah. So I think over the years we've become really, really strict about the kind of intake that we have. We don't expect great qualification, nor do we expect great education. So your marks does not matter to us. Your educational qualification also does not matter to us. What really matters to us is your attitude. And there is a way that we figure out. We have people do really difficult on the ground work for us. their attitude and their willingness to actually stay in a difficult job is what really is something that we measure people on. So, but if anybody does really want to apply, our email ID is up on the website. You can just go and send us your resume, because we are currently in taking interns and we're in taking full-time employees as well. Um, so there are opportunities available, and the only thing is it's not easy, and it does require someone to be extremely passionate about the cause. You need to be super passionate about transgender community or job creation, and you need to be someone who's willing to probably let go of a lot of fancy things that you might get in another corporate versus working in a social startup. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so 60% of our organization is transgender people, 65% actually. So the majority of the people working in my organization are all transgender people, and which is why we've been able to do the kind of work that we're doing. So we don't want to simply tell the world that, hey, you hire transgender people and recruit them in your organization when we ourselves don't do it. The aim is that we do increase that number, we make it at least 70-80% or something along those lines if possible. We do invest in training the people who come to us quite a bit, only so that they can be successful in their job as well. So yeah. So there is a very tight-knit process that is involved in doing this. So anybody that reaches out to us, we first have a screening process itself, and that takes good amount of time, where we completely understand where is the person coming from, what are their challenges, what is their background, their biodata, their ID collection. Everything happens in that screening round, and from there we know if that person is interested in getting jobs. Will they be able to get the job directly, or will they need training? Will they need mentoring and all of that? So we have our own metrics to identify those things, and everything is done internally. Where we do depend on NGOs or resources is in our initial reference only. So there are a lot of NGOs that are working on the ground. They help us by referring people who want jobs. But once they refer them, Periphery takes up the entire process itself. So after screening, they go through training if required. There are some people who come up who are pretty well educated and skilled, so they don't necessarily need training. So we then directly refer them to jobs. After they've been referred to jobs, we ensure that we're sensitizing the company, because we want to ensure that this is a safe and an inclusive environment both for our candidate, and even the people in the company should be feeling comfortable. Because a lot of us don't know, and a lot of us have our own unconscious biases towards the LGBTQ community. We may not behave appropriately, so we also sensitize the company. And after which is when the person actually joins the workplace. So there is a lot that is happening behind the scenes to actually make any placement successful. So actually, we started off in Chennai, but our work has expanded quite a bit in Bangalore. Although I am a Chennaiite at heart, and I live in Chennai with my family, unfortunately, we had to move a large portion of our work to Bangalore because the environment and the acceptance was much better. In terms of companies, policies, companies sensitizing, companies investing money so that they can sensitize, have gender neutral bathrooms, etc., etc. So right now, a lot of our people actually get placed in Bangalore only. It's just that because of the pandemic and everything, all of our teammates are from Chennai, so we've come back home. And we will be working out of Chennai only for a while, but in otherwise, I think Chennai's market is not as receptive as yet. There are organizations that have come forward, but the numbers are very small. And I feel like there is a long, long way to go, because Tamil Nadu used to be one of the first in the country that came up with a transgender welfare board. It was extremely progressive, but now if you compare it to a lot of different states, there's not too much being done with respect to employment. Yeah, so the MNCs have global policies, and that cover the entire LGBT spectrum, and which is why the word LGBT has become so famous. And sometimes we also think that LGBT is a westernized concept. Like the term has been taken from the West, but lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people have been in India, have been in our country for the longest time. The reference is there in our history, is there in mythology, is there in Hinduism, is so much of it is mentioned. It's just that we never really put the word LGBTQ to it. But coming back to your question of how MNCs react in general, I think there is a willingness and an intent to actually do things because their own headquarters kind of push for it. So most of the organization, 99% of our plus placements happen in MNCs. So we work with organizations like Amazon, Walmart Labs, IBM, Accenture, some of the hotels over here, Novotel, and some of those companies. So most of our organizations that are recruiting do have a pretty open mindset, and there are great opportunities available. But I mean, let's also look at it this way that the public is who even the people that we meet in corporates are at the end of the day just public. I mean, we're talking about the larger society itself. There is a skepticism, and it only comes from a place of not knowing, just being unaware of what this really means, what does being trans mean. And most of us have such wrong thoughts filled in because of media and all the other terrible representation that we've had. That's the only image that we have. So unfortunately, majority of the public has that opinion, but we've seen that through sensitization, through awareness creation, people actually feel, and I do have a trust that people are inherently good at heart. So we have seen that people actually being very receptive if they are being taught. And that's why I think in corporate spaces, we do sometimes come across people who are not very open, but at least most of them don't ever create issues. And just taking the first step to understand, even if you don't accept it, is really important. Yeah, that it brought another thought to my mind that the reason why people think it's not important is because they feel that LGBTQ people are not people around me. It can't be my brother, it can't be my sister, it can't be my parents. It is some third person outside. But that's actually really wrong to think, because LGBTQ people can be our own friends and family members. And it's just that they're suffering, they constantly have to hide themselves, they're living in stress and depression only and only because people around don't understand and they're scared to come out. So I would suggest that if any of you are actually thinking that this is something that is not relevant to India or people around me, then even in your own college, there are definitely students who are struggling and who are suffering because maybe they are teased, maybe they're bullied for the way they walk, for the way they talk, and for their gender, for their sexuality, etc. So, which is why this becomes so important, because we're talking about basic human rights. If I can just be myself, why can't anyone else be themselves? Of Section 377, I think that was long overdue. It shouldn't have even been a law that was put up. To give a context to the people who are probably listening into this, this was a very old draconian law that the British came in and imposed. So India was actually far more inclusive and far more open-minded before the British came and told us that a certain kind of people, which by that they meant the LGBTQ community, is wrong. The way they are is incorrect, etc., etc. But India never had those kind of segregation or discrimination at all otherwise. So that's why they put that law in a way to kind of harass the community, and it finally got rid of 2 years ago. And British actually removed that law from their country ages ago. But yeah, I think this is absolutely needed, and it's given a hope to a lot of people. It's given hope to a lot of youngsters that they can be themselves. And we see a lot of impact of that coming forward. The government at various level has been releasing policies, has been doing work, not just in support of trans community, but the larger LGBTQ spectrum as well. So yeah, it was just needed so bad. So yeah. One story that really moved me. I, I, I mean, and I obviously would encourage all of you to read up a lot more about the transgender community, because what we see is only a fraction. The community is very diverse, and everybody has their own way of being. No one transgender person is like the other transgender person. There are trans men, there are trans women, there are gender non-conforming people. It's a very diverse and a very vibrant community. So do a little bit of research, but there's one story that has really moved me and made me very stronger about doing my work. And this was back when we just started Periphery in 2017. It was the initial days, and we were still figuring out how do we connect to employers, how do we get people jobs. This trans woman, her name is Madhu. She reached out to us and she was like, I want a job. Any job it is, I don't mind. You give me 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, something I want so I can survive. I said, Jarinka, like, we'll definitely look at it and we'll figure out what we can do. So we reached out to Chai Kings, we got her a job and all of that. And only after that, I kind of understood her backstory that for 20 years before that, her parents had thrown her out of the house. So ever since she was about 16, 17 years of age, Madhu was out of the house. She spent about 20 years living off the streets, begging, sex work, which also made her become very alcoholic as well. And removing all of those things obviously took time, but then she decided that no, I want some change in my life. So she finally got the job. And after she got the job, after 20-25 years, her family called her and invited her back for a family wedding to do some rituals as a woman. So for me, that moment, that hearing that meant a lot, because Madhu just called up and she has rituals in my own house, in my family wedding. I can't believe it. So I think that's what job really does for the trans community. It's not just about having some financial independence, but it's about gaining the respect. It's about probably a chance to connect with your family back again. So that really reinforced why Periphery's job is that much more important. And so many more people like that. I mean, this is just one story, and it's because of people like these and the change and the impact that happens in their life that we really feel like no matter how difficult it gets, we really feel like doing our work and continuing it.